Every prophet had a miracle. That was Moses. Jesus was born from a virgin. He had the ability to heal people. He had many different miracles that proved that he is God's
son,
God's messenger. Sorry.
It sounded like you were about to say God's son.
I was about to say that he's God's messenger. Astaghfirullah. You're making me
No, you almost had it. It's a Freudian slip.
Yeah, it almost slipped. I'm not gonna lie. And then you have Muhammad's miracle. What was it? Did you notice that? No, nothing that Moses got or Jesus got. But you know what Muhammad's miracle was?
He didn't have one.
Yes, he did.
No, he didn't. The Quran says he didn't do any miracles.
The Qur'an is his miracle.
Ah, come on.
It is. I'll tell you what. The beauty of the Qur'an is that you cannot change one word. You cannot replace one word without it being known. It cannot be tampered with. That
there are different words in the Quran, in other Qurans, then that would show that the Quran is not a miracle?
The Qur'an is one and there is no other. There's no version, there's no different words, there's no different that. And if anybody tries to make their own version of it, it is picked out right away and it's known that it's false, it's not true. So that's what you cannot mess with. Now,
so, wait, pause, because you said something extremely important.
Okay.
So I'm asking you, if the Quran, different versions with different words, would that prove that the Quran is not a miracle?
In biblical tradition, a miracle is not merely a collection of beautiful words. A miracle is a real historical event that transcends the laws of nature, occurs publicly, can be witnessed, and serves as direct evidence that a person is truly sent by God. Moses struck the sea with his staff, and the waters parted. That was no metaphor. It happened before the eyes of the entire nation of Israel. Jesus healed a man born blind, raised Lazarus who had been dead for 4 days, and walked on water. Thousands witnessed these miracles, and some even recorded them. Now compare that with the Muslim claim that Muhammad performed no such miracles, but that the Quran itself is the miracle, because they say no one can match its beauty in Arabic. But here lies the problem. If the definition of a miracle is based on literary eloquence, then countless other works of literature could be considered divine. Pre-Islamic Arabic poetry is often regarded by scholars as more refined than the Quran. We also have Shakespeare in English, Homer in Greek, and Rumi in Persian. Do any of these qualify as divine revelation? Of course not. Beauty is not proof of divinity. Moreover, Muhammad himself admitted that he was not given miraculous signs like the prophets before him. In Surah Al-Isra, when the Quraysh challenged him to perform physical miracles, like causing springs to gush from the earth, ascending to the heavens, or bringing down a physical book from the sky, his answer was clear. I am only a man sent as a messenger. And if the Quran is to be considered a miracle, we must ask, why does it contain scientific and historical errors? In Surah Al-Kahf, it says the sun sets in a muddy spring. In Surah At-Tariq, it claims that semen originates from between the backbone and the ribs. These are not poetic expressions. They are factual claims that are scientifically false. How can a divine miracle contain such fundamental mistakes?
The Quran, different versions with different words, would that prove that the Quran is not a miracle?
There are no different versions. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
I understand. I'm just asking it.
Yes, of course. If there are, and if they can, if somebody can bring me a book that is not the Quran and say, this is the true version of the Quran, I'm not going to be able to tell that that's the Quran and it's the different, it's the same teachings, it's the same whatever, it's not the same exact book, then yeah, but they cannot do it. The way the words are put together, the way that, no, because this is not a mess. The words that are in the Quran are not man-made. They are a message from God directly through Gabriel to Muhammad. These are not human words.
I know you believe that, but
even if the Prophet himself try to change it, he can't.
I'm addressing, sister. I'm addressing what you said directly. I can show you myself right now multiple different Quran versions.
And I bet you any scholar will be able to pinpoint which ones are the wrong ones and which one is the real one.
Actually, it's funny that you say that because the scholars used to debate over this in early Islam. They used to debate over which readings were correct.
They debated over the translations, how they understood it, how they...
All Arabic, sister. All Arabic. Different words in Arabic.
No, I understand it's all Arabic. But, for example, I'll give you a poem. Me and you could read the same poem. I'll translate it or I'll understand it and perceive it in a certain way. And you might perceive it in a completely different way.
I know what you mean. You're talking about interpretation. I'm not talking about that.
Interpretation, exactly. Those are the differences, but it's not the actual book.
No, sister. It's not bent on interpretation. It's not translation. It's literally different Arabic words that they are fighting over to say which one was actually the correct reading, not the correct understanding, the correct reading. What did it actually say? Have you heard, like, for example, have you heard of the recitation of Hafs?
No,
Okay. What about Warsh?
no.
Okay. So just to like break this down just simply, the Hafs recitation of the Quran. Hafs is a person who got his recitation of the Quran from a man named Asim, okay, who got his from, I forgot who gave it to him, but eventually they tried to go back to Uthman. So, and there's problems with that chain too, but just to keep it simple. So Hafs learned his recitation, his reading of the Quran from Asim. That version of the Quran is the most popular version of the Quran today. That's the one that was actually, what's the word? When they make it official, they made his Quran official in 1924 in Egypt. Okay. There used to be different Qurans in the schools and stuff like that, but they didn't want to confuse the educational system. So there you go. Thank you guys. Standardized. They standardized the Hafs reading of the Quran over the others. Okay. However, in Morocco, they standardized the Warsh reading of the Quran. Warsh is another person who got his recitation from someone.
Okay,
Right.
Okay, you're confusing something. These are people, these are scholars that are translating or explaining it in their ways. These are not people that wrote it. There's madhahib, there's the Hanbali, Shafi'i, all those people that sat there.
They have nothing to do with the readings of the Quran, sister. Nothing. So you have Hafs reading of the Quran that was standardized above the other Qurans. That happens because there's multiple Qurans out there.
If the Qur'an is truly one, singular, and unchanging, then there should be no different versions. Yet today, we have the Hafs Qur'an, the Warsh Qur'an, the Duri Qur'an, the Qalun Qur'an, and others. These versions differ not merely in pronunciation or recitation styles, but in actual words, grammatical structures, and even theological meaning. There are verses where the Hafs reading says, Allah is forgiving and merciful, while another version renders it as, Allah is knowing and wise. This is not just a matter of melody or dialect, it is a difference in the actual content of the revelation. Then the Muslim replies, all of these come from authentic readings. Our scholars know how to identify which ones are right and which are not. If you claim the Qur'an has never changed, yet in the same breath admit that scholars must sift through different versions and decide which ones are authentic and which are not, then you are, perhaps unknowingly, confessing that there have been changes, discrepancies, and inconsistencies in the very text you claim to be perfect. And when we ask why the Hafs version is the dominant one today, the answer doesn't come from heaven. It comes from a human committee in Egypt in the year 1924. That committee made a man-made standardization and removed other readings from official education systems. The Duri Qur'an, for instance, was pulled from madrasas because it did not align with Hafs. If this book were truly divinely preserved, why did a council of men have to choose, discard, and reconstruct the readings? That's not divine preservation, that's human intervention, and it shatters the claim that the Qur'an is unaltered. Even Ibn Mujahid, the 10th century scholar who canonized the 7 official qira'at, did so by eliminating and disregarding dozens of other readings that were widespread and locally accepted at the time. If Allah truly preserved a single Quranic version, why were so many variants allowed to develop and then selectively approved or suppressed based on political and geographic convenience? In contrast, the Bible is honest about its manuscript history. Thousands of ancient copies exist, and scholars examine them transparently to trace the original text. Christianity does not hide the fact that there are manuscript variations. But none of these affect the core doctrines of the faith: Christ's death, resurrection, his divinity, and the gospel of grace. Meanwhile, in Islam, the variant readings actually change the meaning and interpretation of the revelation, and instead of being openly discussed, they are often concealed or treated as privileged knowledge for elite scholars only. So when a Muslim says, the Qur'an is a miracle because it has never changed, Our answer must be, that is not a miracle, that is a myth. What has changed is not just the recitation, but the narrative. And the true God does not entrust his revelation to a human committee in 1924. He declares his word through the person of Jesus Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
There's
There is
only
a
one
difference.
Quran.
Okay.
You can argue that till tomorrow morning. You can't change my mind.
Right. So, well, you seem like a person who thinks, and like I've been enjoying the conversation with you. If I were to show you certain differences between the Hafs Quran and, let's say, like a Warsh Quran, for example, you would see that for yourself, right? And then, like, it's not my words. You're not taking my words for, because I know that you have your own beliefs and convictions. So my words don't mean anything. If I show it to you, though, will you then accept, what you see before your eyes?
I don't have the proper knowledge to be able to tell you which one is actually the Quran. I'm not that knowledgeable to be able to tell you which one is fake, which one is real. But at the end of the day, it is one Quran. There's no different versions of it. But what I wanted to, the message that I was trying to deliver to you, let me bring my point across. To me, my personal belief is that whether it's the Torah, the Bible, or the Quran, it's like a 3-part book. Part 1, part 2, part 3. And at the end of the day, the message is one. We are all supposed to follow one true God, submit to one true God. From Adam all the way to Muhammad, and every prophet in between had the same message. I do not believe that we should be against each other. I believe that we should respect each other and respect each other's beliefs and continue with the teachings. If you read part 1, that's the Torah. Part 2, that's the Bible. Part 3, it's the Quran. But at the end of the day, the Quran is the final sealed book. It is the word that nobody can tamper with.
I know you believe that, but here's my thing again. When you say that you don't have the knowledge to tell me which Quran is the right one.
No, somebody try to replace a sentence or replace a word. I don't have the knowledge to be able to tell you which one is fake.
And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you this right now too. Your scholars don't either. Your scholars, your early Islamic scholars, Tabari, Qurtubi, people like that. They recount where people used to fight over different readings of the Quran, over different versions of the Quran. They used to fight over this stuff because this stuff is real and it exists. And I know it's not your fault. I believe that you're probably just parroting something you've learned and grown up with. You've been told in this generation, us too, that there's one Quran, absolutely the same way, every word, letter for letter, dot for dot, is the exact same no matter where you go in the world. That's been the myth. And that myth, thanks to the internet, has been broken, has been shattered, because now anyone can go on the internet and access the Hafs Quran, Warsh Quran, the Duri Quran, Kalun Quran, Kathir Quran, Khalaf Quran.
This is the first I hear of any of these, honestly.
Say that again?
This is the first I hear of any of these, honestly.
And that's okay. Like we grow and we learn. Like, we gotta do research and then look into these things. So like, that's why I'm not, beating you over the head with this stuff. I want to, because you're so respectful and you have a conviction and a passion that I do respect.
The Torah and the Gospel never hinted at the coming of a final prophet who would bring a new book to complete previous revelations. On the contrary, they contain the promise of the coming Messiah, not a last prophet. The Gospel affirms that Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, Matthew 5:17, and that after his coming there would be no further revelation, because the Word became flesh, John 1:14, and fully revealed God, Hebrews 1:13. Jesus did not merely bring a message from God. He is the very Word of God. No other prophet in history ever dared to say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, John 14:6. That kind of statement could never come from a mere messenger. He was not pointing to the way. He is the way. Then 6 centuries later, the Quran emerged, not as a complement to the Gospel, but as a contradiction and a denial of its central message. The Qur'an explicitly denies the divinity of Christ, Surah 4:171, rejects his crucifixion, Surah 4:157, and reduces Jesus to a mere prophet. That's not the continuation of revelation. It is a rejection of previous revelation. How can anyone claim that all these scriptures carry the same message when the Qur'an itself undermines the core theology of salvation in the gospel, namely, the death and resurrection of Christ for the forgiveness of sins? If the gospel is true, then the Qur'an is false. If the Qur'an is true, then the gospel is fatally wrong. Both cannot be true because their core messages are fundamentally opposed. So when a Muslim says, "We shouldn't be in conflict," we say in return, "We're not looking for conflict, but we won't sacrifice truth for the sake of a false sense of unity." Because true love doesn't blur every difference. It shines light in the midst of confusion. We honor every person, but we cannot honor a system that obscures the gospel, denies the cross, and reduces Christ to a mere man. That is not a small difference. It is the difference between salvation and destruction. God does not unify revelation by blending truth with error. He declares truth finally and perfectly in the person of Jesus Christ, the eternal Word, the only way to the Father, and Lord of all ages.